Hi. So in this video, we are going to be extending on an idea that we discussed earlier. So in one of the earlier lessons, I talked about how to compute the sum and average of n numbers. Alright, so in that example, we talked about the sum and average of 3 numbers or 5 numbers. Just update the value of n. Alright, and it will work. Alright, so if you haven't seen the video, please go and see that first. Now in this video, I'm going to talk about computing the sum and average, but in this case n is not known before you execute the code. Okay, that means only during code execution the user has a way of deciding when to stop the entry of new inputs. Alright, so let's see that in action now. Okay, as usual, we're going to have a loop counter, so I'm going to call it, for example, I. Okay, and I'm going to put it as 0 first, alright, and as well as sum 0, and I'm going to put in a variable for num, which is the input that the user is going to enter. Alright, now we talked about 3 different loops: for loop, while loop, do while loop. Okay, and for loop is generally used when you know upfront the number of iterations that you need to execute. Okay, but if you do not know, then it is better to use a while loop. Alright, that is my recommendation. Okay, because you can have a what we call an infinite loop and then terminate the loop, okay, based on some user input or user value, okay, that is captured. Alright, so how can we go about doing this? Alright, so what we can do is we can say while 1. So what is while 1? So 1 is basically a logic in logical sense, 1 is true, which means that I will always execute this loop. Okay, so if I have a while 1 loop, which means it will run forever, I must then provide a condition to make sure that I can exit the loop. Okay, so let's do step by step. So the first step is I prompt the user to enter a number. Okay, and then I capture that number. Alright, now we want to make sure that we exit the loop, alright, if some number is or some condition is met. So the user must be aware of what is the condition. Alright, so for example, I can say -1 to n. Okay, so if the user enters -1, then I will end the loop. Alright, so what I can do is I can check if num equals to -1, then I can end the loop. How do I end the loop? So in an earlier video we talked about the continue and break. So by using break I can end the loop. Okay, so if the user did not enter -1, alright, so I can put a else here, then it is a valid number, so I add it. Sum equals to sum plus num. Alright, and then I also increment I. Okay, so if you look at this structure now, what we are having is we are having an infinite loop while 1. That means this entire code will run forever. So I'll keep asking the user to enter a number and I'll capture the number. But if the number is -1, then I will exit the loop. Alright, I'll break out from the loop. If it is not -1, that means it is a valid input. I will compute the sum and also increment I. Okay, so let's just see what happens when I exit the loop. Alright, and I print out the sum. Okay, see out sum equals to, alright, and we're going to print out the sum value. Okay, and I also want to print out the I value. I equals to, alright, so let's run this. Okay, so I want to print out what is the final value of sum and I, because I is basically the loop counter. Okay, so let me key in 3 numbers. Okay, 1, 2 and 3. So 1 plus 2 plus 3 is 6. So to end the loop, I'm going to key in -1. Alright, so you can see that sum is 6 and I is 3, which is correct, alright, because 1 plus 2 plus 3 is 6, so the minus 1 was not added to the sum, okay, because it's a part of the else block over here, and I is 3, okay, which means I have run the loop 3 times. Okay, so with that I can actually go ahead to compute the average equals to, let me put the double quote here, okay, sum divided by I, okay, again, since both are integers, all right, I will lose the floating point value, all right, so to avoid that I will just keep sum, okay, as a float. Okay, so by keeping one of the parameters as a float, I'll be able to keep the floating point value. Of course, you can do casting as well. Okay, I talked about that in an earlier video, but I'll just use the floating variable this time around. Okay, so I'm going to key it again, 1, 2, 3. Okay, and then minus 1. Okay, so the average is 2. Okay, so let me put that over here and let me just run it one more time. Okay, so 5, 6 and 8 for example, and then minus 1. Okay, so I get 6.33. okay, so this gives you an example of how you can compute the sum and average, all right, of a number of inputs where you do not know upfront how many inputs you are expecting. Okay, so I hope that this gives you a good idea how to also incorporate the break statement inside the while loop. Alright, thank you for watching. I'll see you in my next video. Bye.